Hello, viewers of the future. I'm Endragh. We're continuing with more Color of Magic. Like I said in this intro, I have to say his name. So, they fought Bel-Shemharoth last time. They defeated Bel-Shemharoth this last time. And now we're going to continue onwards and upwards with the story. With the salamanders and the picture that's too exposed. Right. The wizard pulled himself across the floor, painfully, and whispered, "What the hell was that?" "Why were they so bright?" muttered Twoflower. "God, my head!" "Too bright," said Rincewind. He looked across the floor to the cage on the picture box. The lizards inside, now noticeably thinner, were watching him with interest. "The salamanders!" moaned Twoflower. "The picture will be overexposed. I know it." "They're salamanders?" said Rincewind incredulously. "Of course, standard attachment." Rincewind staggered across to the box and picked it up. He'd seen salamanders before, of course, but they had all been smaller specimens. They had also been floating in a jar of pickles in the Curiebiological Museum down in the cellars of Unseen University, since live salamanders were extinct among the Circle C. Sorry, my ear is itchy now. Gosh darn, all these things are happening. Alright. He tried to remember the little he knew about them. Okay, cool. They were magical creatures. They also had no mouths, since they subsidized entirely on the nourishment qualities of the octarine wavelengths in the Discworld sunlight, which they absorbed through their skin. Of course, they also absorbed the rest of the sunlight as well, stored it in special sacs until it was excreted in the normal way. A desert inhabitant by Discworld salamanders was a veritable lighthouse at night. A desert inhabited by Discworld salamanders were a veritable lighthouse at night. Rincewind put them down and nodded grimly. With all the octarine light in this magical place, the creatures had been gorging themselves, and then nature had taken its course. The picture box slid away on its tripod. Rincewind aimed a kick at it, and missed. He was beginning to dislike sapient pierwood. Something small stuck in his cheek. He brushed it away irritably. He looked around at a sudden grinding noise, and a voice like a carving knife cutting through silk said, "This is very undignified." "Shut up," said Hearn. He was using cringe to lever the top off the altar. He looked up at Rincewind and grinned. Rincewind hoped the rictus-strung grimace was a grin. "Mighty magic," commanded the barbarian. "Mighty magic," commented the barbarian, pushing down heavily on the complaining blade with a hand the size of a ham. "Now we share the treasure, eh?" Rincewind grunted as something small and hard struck his ear. There was a gust of wind, hardly felt. "How do you know there's treasure in there?" he said. Hearn heaved, and managed to hook his fingers under the stone. "You find choke apples under a choke apple tree," he said. "You find treasure under altars. Logic." He gritted his teeth. The stone swung up and landed heavily on the floor. This time something struck Rincewind's hand, heavily. He clawed at the air and looked at the thing he had caught. It was a piece of stone with 5 + 3 sides. He looked up at the ceiling. Should it be sagging like that? Hearn hummed a little tune as he began to pull crumpled leather from the discreted altar. The air cracked, fluorescent, hummed. Intangible winds gripped the wizard's robe, flapping it out in eddies of blue and green sparks. Around Rincewind's head mad, half-formed spirits howled and gibbled as they were sucked past. He tried to raise a hand. It was immediately surrounded by a glowing octarine corona as the rising magic winds roared past. The gale raced through the room without stirring one iota of dust. Yet it was blowing Rincewind's eyelids inside out. It screamed along the tunnels, its banshee screech wails bouncing madly from stone to stone. Twoflower staggered up, bent double in the teeth of the astral gale. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. "Oh, Yeah. What the hell? Yeah. What the hell is this? He shouted. Or wait, was that Rincewind? I don't know who read that line, so what the hell is this? He shouted. Rincewind half turned. Immediately the howling winds caught him, nearly pitching him over. Poltergeist eddies, spinning in the rushing air, snatched at his feet. Hearn's arm shot out and caught him. A moment later he and Twoflower had been dragged into the lee of the ravaged altar, and lay panting on the floor. Besides them the talking sword Kryn sparkled, its magic field boosted 100-fold by the storm. "Hold on!" screamed Rincewind. "The wind!" shouted Twoflower. "Where's it coming from? Where's it blowing to?" He looked into Rincewind's mask of sheer terror. Terror, which made him redouble his own grip on the stones. "We're doomed," muttered Rincewind, while overhead the roof cracked and shifted. Where do shadows come from? That's where the wind is blowing." That was in fact happening, as the wizard knew. What was in fact happening, as the wizard knew, was that as the abused spirit of Bel Shamharas sank through the deeper Cathalnic plains, his brooding spirit was being sucked out of the very stone into the region which, according to the Discworld's most reliable priests, was both under the ground and somewhere else. In consequence, his temple was being abandoned to the ravage of time, who for thousands of shamefaced years had been reluctant to go near the place. Now the sudden release, accumulated weight of all those pent-up seconds, was bearing down heavily on the unbraced stones. Hearn glanced up at the winding cracks inside. Then he put 2 fingers into his mouth and whistled. Strangely, the real sound rang out loudly over the pseudo-sounds of the winding astral whirlpool that was forming in the middle of the great octagonal slab. It was followed by a hollow echo which sounded, he fancied, strangely like the bouncing of strange bones. Then came a noise with no hint of strangeness. It was the hollow hoofbeats. Hearn's warhorse cantered through a creaking archway and reared up by its master, its mane streaming in the gale. The barbarian pulled himself to his feet and slung his treasure bag into a sack that hung from the saddle, then hauled himself onto the beast's back. He reached down and grabbed Twoflower by the scruff of his neck, dragging him across the saddle tree. As the horse turned around, Rincewind took a desperate leap and landed behind Hearn, who raised no objections. The horse pounded sure-footed along the tunnels, leaping sudden slides of rubble and adroitly sidestepping huge stones as they thundered down from the straining roof. Rincewind, clinging on grimly, looked behind them. No wonder the horse was moving so swiftly. Close behind them, speeding through the flickering violet light, were a large ominous-looking chest and a picture box that skittered along. Sorry, I gotta read that line again. Okay. No wonder the horse was moving so swiftly. Close behind, speeding through the flickering violet light, was a large, ominous-looking chest and a picture box that skittered along dangerously on its 3 legs. So great was the ability of sapient purewood to follow its master anywhere. So great was the ability of sapient purewood to follow its master anywhere. The grave goods of dead emperors had traditionally been made of it. They reached the outer air a moment before the octagonal arch finally broke and smashed into the flags. The sun was rising. Behind them a column of dust rose as the temple collapsed in on itself, but they did not look back. That was a shame, because Twoflower might have been able to obtain pictures unusual even by Discworld standards. There was movement in the smoking ruins. They seemed to be growing a green carpet. Then an oak tree spiraled up, branching out like an exploding giant rocket. Exploding green rocket, and was in the middle of a very venerable corpse. And was in the middle of a venerable corpse even before the tips of its aged branches had stopped quivering. A A beech burst out like a fungus, matted, rooted, matured, rotted. A beech, birch. A I don't know why I'm having problems with this line. A beech burst out like a fungus, matured, rooted, rotted, and fell in a cloud of tinder dust amid its struggling offspring. Already the temple was a half-buried heap of mossy stone. But time, having intentionally gone for the throat, was now setting out to complete the job. The boiling interface between decaying magic and ascending entropy roared down the hill and overtook the galloping horse, whose rider, being themselves creatures of time, completely failed to notice it. But it lashed into the enchanted trees with the whip of centuries. Impressive, isn't it? Impressive, isn't it? Observed a voice by Rincewind's knee as the horse cantered through the haze of decaying timber and falling leaves. The voice had an eerie metallical ring to it. Rincewind looked down at Cringe the sword. It had a couple of rubies set in the pommel. He got the impression that they were watching him. From the moorland rimward of the wood, they watched the battle between the trees and time, which could only have one ending. It was a sort of cabaret to the main business of the halt, which was the consumption of quite a lot of beer. Which was the consumption of quite a lot of bear, which had cautiously come within bowshot of Herne. What? Okay, I'll just leave that line as it is, because I don't know. Rincewind watched Herne over the top of his slab of greasy meat. Herne going about the business of being a hero, he realized, was quite different to the wine-bibbling cariosus Herne, who occasionally came to Ankh-Morpork. He was cat-cautious, lithe as a panther, and thought thoroughly at home. And I've survived Bel-Shamharoth, dang it, Rincewind reminded himself. Fantastic. Twoflower was helping the heroes sort through the treasure stolen from the temple. It was mostly silver set with unpleasant purple stones, representation of spiders, octopi, and the tree-dwelling Octershire of the Hublands waste, figured largely in the heap. Rincewind tried to shut his ears to the grating voice beside him. It was no use. And then I belong to the parish of Red Durant, and played a prominent part in the Battle of the Great Nerf, which is where I received the slight nick you may have noticed some 2/3 of the way up my blade, Cringe was saying from its temporary home in a Tuscarora. Some infidel was wearing an octagon collar, most unsporting, and of course I was a lot sharper in those days, and my master used to use me to cut silk handkerchiefs in midair. And am I bothering you? Huh? Oh, no, not at all. It's all very interesting, said Rincewind, with his eyes still on Herne. How trustworthy would he be? Here they were, out in the wild. There were trolls about. I could see you were a cultured person, Cringe went on. So seldom do I meet really interesting people, for any length of time, anyways. What I'd really like is a nice mantelpiece to hang over, somewhere nice and quiet. I spent a couple hundred of years on the bottom of the lake once. That must have been fun, said Rincewind absolutely. Not really, said Cringe. No, I suppose not. What I'd really like is be plowshare. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like an existence with some point to it. Twoflower hurried over to the wizard. I had a great idea, he bubbled. Yeah, said Rincewind warily. Why don't we get Herne to accompany us to Quirm? Twoflower looked amazed. How did you know? He said. I just thought you'd think it, said Rincewind. Herne ceased stuffing silverware into his saddle-bag, and grinned encouragingly at them. Then his eyes strayed to the luggage. If we had him with us, who'd attack us? Said Twoflower. Rincewind scratched his chin. Herne, he suggested. But we saved his life in the temple. Well, if by attack you mean kill, said Rincewind, I don't think he'd do that. He's not that sort. He'd just rob us and tie us up and leave us for the wolves, I expect. Oh, come on. Look, this is real life, snapped Rincewind. I mean, here you are, carrying around a box full of gold. Don't you think anyone in their right minds would jump at the chance of pitching it? I would, he added mentally, if I hadn't seen what the luggage does to prying fingers. Then the answer hit him. He looked from Herne to the picture box. The picture imp was doing its laundry in a tiny tub, while the salamanders dozed in the cage. I've got an idea, he said. I mean, what is it heroes really want? Gold? Said Twoflower. No, I mean really want. Twoflower frowned. I don't quite understand, he said. Rincewind picked up the picture box. Herne, he said, come over here, will you? The days passed peacefully. True, a small band of bridge trolls tried to ambush them on one occasion, and a party of brigands nearly caught them unaware one night, but unwisely tried to investigate the luggage before slaughtering the sleepers. Herne demanded, and got, double pay for both occasions. If any harm comes to us, said Rincewind, then there will be no one to occupy the magic box. No more pictures of Herne, you understand? Herne nodded, his eyes fixed on the latest picture. It showed Herne striking a heroic pose, with one foot on a heap of slain trolls. Me and you and little friend Twoflower, we all got on okay, he said. Sorry. Me, you, and little friend Twoflowers. We all got on okay, he said. Also tomorrow, may we get a better profile? Okay? He carefully wrapped the picture in troll skin and stowed it in his saddlebag along with the others. It seems to be working, said Twoflower admiringly, as Herne rolled ahead to scout the road. Sure, said Rincewind. What heroes like best is themselves. You're getting quite good at using the picture box, you know that? Yar. So you might like to have this, said Twoflower. Twoflower held out a picture. What is it? Said Rincewind. Oh, just the picture you took in the temple. Rincewind looked in horror. There, bordered by a few glimpses of tentacles, was a huge, horribly callous and potion-stained and unforgettable thumb. Sorry. Blah! Rincewind looked in horror. There, bordered by a few glimpses of tentacle, was a huge, horribly calloused, potion-stained, and unfocused thumb. That's the story of my life, he said warily. You win, said Fate, pushing the heap of souls across the gaming table. The assembled gods relaxed. There will be other games, he added. The lady smiled, with two eyes that were like holes in the universe. And then there was nothing but the ruins of the forest, and a cloud of dust on the horizon, which was drifting away on the breeze, and sitting on a pitted and moss-grown milestone, a black and ragged figure. His was the air of one who is unjustly put upon, who is dreaded and feared, yet who is the only friend of the poor and the best doctor for the mortally wounded. Death, although of course completely eyeless, watched Rincewind disappear with what would, had his face possessed any mobility at all, had been a frown. Death, although exceptionally busy at all times, decided that he now had a hobby. There was something about the wizard that irked him beyond measure. He didn't keep appointments, for one thing. I'll get you yet, Cooley? C-U-L-L-Y? Cooley, said Death in a voice like the slamming of laden coffin lids. See if I don't. That's the other chapter. We are now technically on chapter 3. Technically. Alright. It was called the Weinberg, and it rose amongst almost one half of a mile above the green valley, a mountain huge and gray and upside down. At its base it was a mere scope of yards across. Then it rose through the ceiling, clinging clouds, and curved gracefully outwards like an upturned turnip, until it was tourniqueted by a plateau fully a quarter of a mile across. There was a tiny forest up there, its greenery cascading over the lip. There were buildings. There was even a small river tumbling over the edge in a waterfall so wind-whipped that it reached the ground as a rain. All right, let's try that description again. There were buildings. There was even a small river tumbling over the edge in a waterfall so wind-whipped that it reached the ground as a rain. There was also a number of cave mouths, a few yards below the plateau. They had a crude, carved, regular look about them, so that on this crisp afternoon morning the Weinberg hung over the clouds like a giant dovecote. All right, there's that line. This would mean that doves had a wingspan slightly in excess of 40 yards. Where's our save point? Okay, save point? Wow, did I just say that? Good lord. All right, this has been Color of Magic. Hearn has now joined the party with Rincewind and Twoflower and the Luggage, as well as Cringe. Hopefully the voices aren't terrible. I'm not the best voice actor, but I am trying. I can't promise anything, and I'm trying to keep the voices somewhat similar, but, the best I can do. Anyways, I have been Endragh. This has been Color of Magic. I hope I brought a smile to your face, and I will see you tomorrow night. Night-night, guys.